Damien, first question for you. Which emerging technologies do you think will have the greatest impact on security in the future?
So I think everybody would sort of admit and say that artificial intelligence or machine learning is, the turning point that's going to have a massive impact. But I think there's also some even basic things that are already having an impact today that we just don't realise. So if you think of Internet of Things devices or IoT devices, these are things that we wear, we buy, we put in our homes, we put in our workplaces. The ability for those devices to be easily manipulated, hacked, and to provide sort of an egress point for organisations that are hostile to come into your organisation is becoming more and more common. If you think about those individuals that might have robot vacuum cleaners at home, most of those robot vacuum cleaners today can be easily hacked and modified. We love buying things at certain vendors who make it really easy to return things. So how do you know a device that you've bought from that vendor hasn't actually already been modified, and now as soon as you plug it in at home, they've got immediate access to camera, voice, audio. It's as simple as sound bars, intelligent speakers and things like that have got microphones, all provide an avenue for people to sort of gain access. So now if you combine that then with artificial intelligence systems that are able to either sort of manipulate those systems as well, deep fakes, that's going to be a huge challenge just at a societal level, because what do you trust anymore?
And I guess when you talk about the Internet of Things in the residential context, that's scary in itself. But when you talk about that across
commercial,
bigger industries,
yep.
defence with Armatech Global and the like, there's a huge number of considerations there, isn't there?
Yes, well, obviously, with connectivity comes a larger footprint attack surface for malicious actors. So all the more, this is where kind of the education and really a holistic approach to solve these ever more complex problems become more important, because we cannot approach the problem in terms of silos. That's why I'm a real proponent, and I know that Tom and Brian and all the people on this panel have been proponents of new kind of ways of looking at things. So I think that convergence, and also thinking about really, if you add the increased attack surface plus AI, it adds that extra layer of complexity. Now, obviously, we're currently in the generative AI era, and we may be decades, depending on how fast the computational theorists get to artificial general intelligence, but we're heading towards that way. So this is where regulation becomes very, very important, which is obviously what Brian has been talking about, and in terms of the workforce with Tom. So I think that overall, this holistic approach will probably put us on a better path.
And I guess in terms of these threats changing with AI and a broader attack surface.
Yes.
How can technology help in addressing some of those threats, Brian?
Well, I suppose we're seeing a range of different technologies coming out in the security industry, which is, as Damien mentioned, AI and machine learning, but video surveillance technologies, access control. We're starting to see robotics becoming a feasible alternative, drones. So there's a whole range of different technologies that are now there, which are evolving, which some people worry that it's going to replace humans, but there's still going to be a role for humans. A lot of these technologies will augment human capacity. But I think, as Ryan said, with these technologies, there are ethical considerations which we need to be aware of, and we need to be. The problem is regulation can never keep up with that. The government I think the federal government is currently trying to develop an AI policy, which...
The National Artificial Intelligence Center, which is engaging with industry, are absolutely correct.
And trying to, not put a marker on the ground, but again, trying to keep up is going to be the challenge, because these technologies are, their life cycles, development cycles are getting shorter and shorter. So I think it's an interesting time to be in the industry. There's a lot of exciting technologies, but it's making sure that we have the mechanisms in place to not control them, but to make sure they don't get out of control. Because Damien knows better than I do some of the things that go wrong.
Like we can't yet predict. Like if you think back to the internet, which was adopted in Australia, from about 1999 onwards, that was something that sped up communication. It gave you the ability to talk to people the other side of the world. It made it easier to get services. to now today, social media is kind of tearing people apart, creating polarization in society and sort of, radicalizing sort of groups. We're just embarking on that journey now with artificial intelligence. What is it going to look like in 20 years' time from now?
Like it's an age-old story, isn't it, in terms of the defence keeping up with the attack? But how does that play out? How does that play out within cybersecurity?
So I think everybody's kind of, for artificial intelligence, looking at it in terms of, can we explain the decision that it's making? So is it explainable AI? Because at the moment we have challenges where these systems are hallucinating, or some people might call it lying, but it's really coming up with information that we can't explain. How did it get to that? And that's really due to the data that it's consuming and leveraging and using. And if you think about data always has some level of bias in it. So it's important to understand what the bias is so that we're not causing undue harm or damage to parts of society that we need to protect. But the challenge is we need to be able to explain it, but then also think about the ethical use of it as well. And that's the human in the loop sort of component. And
I guess with, first maybe, Tom, if you could speak to facial recognition technology and some of the uses that how that's being used in the industry today. And then I guess, Brian, I know you've proposed some considerations for government around the responsible use of that.
Well, there's a product that I'm actually working with at the moment. It's called Dynamic Crowd Measurement, and that actually picks the mood of a crowd. So, for example, at a rock concert, and this is a real example, in the US, in Las Vegas recently, there was 10,000 people in the mosh pit, 40,000 people in the stadium. The artist was playing on stage, got to a certain point in the performance where the crowd was getting into it, the crowd was starting to surge, there was a problem about to happen, and the technology in terms of picking the mood of the crowd and the indicators that it gave, and at the bottom of the stage, it's as simplistic as colours in terms of green, amber, red. That was an indication to the artist that something was going to go wrong, that there was a crowd surge happening within the mosh pit, so he stopped playing. He addressed the crowd, advised them that there was an issue in the mosh pit, and he talked them through it. So without that technology, there would have been a crowd surge, and the outcomes of that could have been people injured, or worst case, somebody fatally injured.
What sort of parameters is it looking at, do you know?
It's measuring the face, so it's the frowns and the smiles. Yep. Yeah. So it also does flow and density. So it's quite unique in the fact that it caters for both those three areas of mood, density, and flow.
And just to pick up, in terms of some of the technologies, there's automated facial recognition, which means you can, if you're looking for particular people you don't want to let into a sporting stadium because they're banned from that venue, you can do that. There are technologies that can monitor people, their shopping for shoplifting, predictive behaviour, which learns behaviour. All these things are very powerful. I think part of the challenge is bringing the public along on the journey, because there is some distrust among some in the community that this is the surveillance state. So that's why there need to be some measures and mechanisms in place. We've developed some draft ethical guidelines for providers to give them some parameters on, there's privacy. There's a whole range of ethics. It shouldn't be discriminatory. There are principles that you need to operate by, because it's got to be fit for purpose, not not to be used for wrong. So, but I don't think government will be able to keep pace with some of those technologies.
Yeah, there's so much emerging at the moment. Different companies developing a lot of different technologies, and it's how that they compete on the industry together, and I suppose organisations selecting the one that's going to deliver the outcome that they want.
Yeah, just as an example, like my engineer, well, they're very, very talented engineers. They can build a chat bot in a day for a specific use case. Okay. So, the speed at which that it's going, we all have to put our heads together, because we really, it's so fast moving that we need all the brains more brains are better than one. So we really, this approach, I think, is going to really help us, because it's just so fast.
Yeah. It's also dealing with the privacy issues of that as well.
Yeah.
And meeting the government concerns and the public concerns.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, artificial intelligence is just a tool.
Yeah.
It's not good or it's bad. It's how it's actually implemented and the use. Because you might, in Tom's example, that's a classic use of preventing injury or death in
Yeah.
an event.
This is where also I feel like in terms of the security regulation as it relates to AI, it becomes really critical because, those guardrails have to be put in place. We want to make sure civil liberties are respected and all of those things. So it's really hypercritical that, and I'm glad, I know Brian is very active in the regulation piece, so we need it.
But we need to act before the beast is unleashed, because once the beast is out there, it's much harder to
rein
it back in again, because it's to some extent it is that with the cyber world is. I don't know how many people would work in cybersecurity across Australia. Would you have a number?
The estimates are around about 40,000 people in cybersecurity alone.
Across Australia, yeah.
So how can the private sector and the public sector and industry stakeholders, how can they collaborate to advance responsible use of these technologies, given that regulation's never quite going to keep up?
Well, there's got to be dialogue. I mean, I think there's the silo mentality that government knows best and private sector knows best. There needs to be some coming together on common ground. Yeah,
The co-design.
Co-design.
So we get an outcome that is, fit for purpose rather than something that is just not workable. But people have to swallow their pride and, engaged.
Yeah. And like there'll be certain events, if you look at, the Medibank, Optus, Latitude Financial sort of data breaches, that's really kind of shown that organisations don't need to be collecting licenses, passport details and things like that. If we had a centralised platform that people could opt in to do digital identity verification, then you wouldn't need businesses collecting and holding on to that information. So there's going to be events like that that'll help to spur the right direction.
Good. Any final thoughts on emerging technologies to conclude the topic?
How we're going to deal with, in a democratic society, deepfakes, I think that's going to be something that we're all kind of a little bit worried about. When you think about, we trust things that we see, view, read or hear. If somebody's got the ability to make a digital fake of you, for example, saying certain things, how do you prove that it wasn't you? Yep. I think that's a challenge that we're going to have to grapple with somehow as a society.
What's the biggest example we've seen of that to date?
Often there's the classic everybody has possibly seen, which is the Obama sort of fake. There's recently been Tom Hanks, a deep fake of him selling and pushing particular products and endorsing them, and he was no way involved in that. There's others that we're likely to see that will interfere with elections and the democratic process.
Primarily through misinformation and also from a security perspective, from the security industry, both physical and cyber, it's the aspect of biometry. So if they have your facial metrics, then it becomes a little bit dangerous, because then if your biometric data is being used to unlock certain things, then obviously that's a huge security risk.
Yeah, imagine, if I'm a frontline worker protecting a piece of infrastructure and I get a video call on my phone and it's the CEO of the company instructing me to do something. I can see it, they're talking, I recognise the voice, the face, so they're most likely to follow those instructions. Yeah. That could be completely faked.
It paints a scary picture.
But I think it's one of those issues that you need to confront rather than just hiding.
Yes.
Hoping it doesn't happen.
Correct.
Because it will happen and then it'll be catastrophic and then you'll have to do something about it. So I think we need to have these discussions so people think about it.
Yes, I mean, I think key is collaboration and not being afraid to share knowledge. I'm a proponent of sharing knowledge with the private sector, with, obviously where government engages with industry. We're Armatech Global, we're very open to sharing information because to us, we're knowledgeable enough. We don't need to be protectionist. We want the knowledge to be out there because a better knowledge ecosystem creates a long-term that is critical, really. If you look at the effect to the public, it creates generational, the prosperity. It's a win-win for both the private sector, the public sector, and how we're really serving the public.
Maybe in the future, Teams, Zoom, or WebEx will have a little thing in the corner that tells you the integrity of that conversation in terms of.
Is there any that often sort of comes up as a solution in different settings? But is there anything like that at the moment that's working well in social media?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for your contributions. We'll take a small break there and come back after.